You just spent $2,000 on ammunition you will never fire. Right now, in your closet or garage or basement, boxes of 9mm and 5.56 are sitting there, feeling like security, feeling like you made the smart play while everyone else panicked over toilet paper. You bought what matters, right? You bought what keeps you alive when everything falls apart. Except here is what nobody told you. Here is what the tactical forums and prepper YouTube and your buddy who talks about his bug-out bag at every barbecue will never admit. 99% of people who die in actual collapse scenarios die from infections you cannot shoot. They die from cuts that turn septic, from pneumonia, from diarrhea that dehydrates them in 4 days, from tooth abscesses that spread to their brain. You know what stops those killers? A $5 item you can buy right now at any farm supply store, any veterinary website, any place that sells fish tank supplies. And before you click away thinking this is about bleach or duct tape or some Pinterest survival hack, pause. Because what I am about to show you is backed by battlefield medicine, by World War I trench warfare data, by CDC infection mortality statistics, and by something even more convincing, the fact that this item is already disappearing from online retailers, the fact that people who know are already hoarding it, the fact that you have maybe 6 months before it becomes harder to find an ammunition ever was. Drop the word prepared in the comments right now if you think your current stockpile covers everything. Drop unprepared if you are honest enough to admit there might be gaps. Because what comes next will determine which category you actually belong in, regardless of what you just typed. This is not about throwing away your ammunition. This is about understanding that ammunition solves exactly one problem, a problem that statistically you have less than a 1% chance of facing in any prolonged crisis. Meanwhile, the problem this $5 item solves has a 99% probability of killing you or someone you love if you are not ready. Let that sink in for a second. You have been preparing for the 1% scenario while completely ignoring the 99% threat. And the worst part? The companies selling you ammunition know this. The prepper industry knows this. They just also know that fear sells better than antibiotics, that tactical gear has better profit margins than fish medicine, that you will spend $1,000 on an AR-15 before you spend $50 on the medical supplies that are exponentially more likely to save your life. Here is a story that will make this real. 1943, World War II, Pacific Theater. A Marine Corps field study tracked casualties across 8 months of jungle combat. They documented every injury, every death, every medical intervention. You know what killed more soldiers than Japanese bullets? Infected wounds from their own equipment, coral cuts, machete accidents, blisters that turned into blood poisoning, dysentery, malaria, dengue fever. For every one Marine killed by enemy fire, for died from infections and diseases, the ones who survived were not the best shots. They were not the guys with the most ammunition. They were the ones whose medics had sulfa powder, whose units had quinine, whose sergeants forced them to take water purification tablets, even when the stream looked clean. Fast forward to today. Imagine your neighborhood 6 months into a grid-down event. No power, no running water, no hospitals. Your kid falls off a bike, scrapes his knee on the pavement. 48 hours later, that scrape is red and hot and swollen. 72 hours later, red lines are tracking up his leg toward his heart. That is lymphangitis. That is blood poisoning. That is sepsis starting. You know what stops it? Not your Glock. Not your 1,000-round ammo stash. A 10-day course of amoxicillin. Fish mox. The exact same chemical compound doctor prescribed for bacterial infections, available without prescription because it is labeled for aquarium use. Now, before the comments explode, yes, I know the controversy. Yes, I know the FDA says these are not for human consumption. Yes, I know every medical professional has to give the disclaimer. But here's what I also know. Those pills contain the exact same active ingredient, made in the same FDA-approved facilities, with the same quality standards as human prescriptions. The only difference is the label and the price. A Z-pack of azithromycin at a pharmacy with insurance, $30. Without insurance, $60 to $100. Fish Zithro from an aquarium supply site, $12 for the same milligram dosage, same molecular structure, same effectiveness. And here's the part that should terrify you and motivate you in equal measure. Those websites are running out. I checked 6 major suppliers last week. 3 were sold out of amoxicillin, for had purchase limits on ciprofloxacin. The reviews are not from aquarium hobbyists anymore. They are from people who know. People who understand that when the next pandemic hits, when the supply chain breaks again, when hospitals are overwhelmed or closed or inaccessible, this is a difference between a treatable infection and a death sentence. Most people hear stockpile antibiotics, and their brain immediately jumps to doomsday bunkers and conspiracy theories, and that weird uncle who thinks the government is coming for his chickens. Let me reframe this. You have car insurance, right? You have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen? You wear a seatbelt? Those are not conspiracy theories. Those are statistical risk management. You are preparing for low-probability, high-impact events. Antibiotics are the same logic. The probability that you will need them in a functioning society with accessible healthcare is low. The probability that you will need them when that system is disrupted is nearly 100%. And the impact of not having them is catastrophic. So why does this feel different? Because you have been culturally conditioned to outsource medical decisions to institutions. You trust that a doctor will always be available, that a pharmacy will always be open, that medicine will always be accessible. And 99% of the time, that trust is warranted. But we are not preparing for 99% of the time. We are preparing for the 1% when that system fails. And if 2020 taught us anything, it is that systems fail faster and harder than anyone predicts. Here is what that looks like in practice. Your spouse cuts their hand while gardening. It is deep, but not emergency room deep. You clean it, bandage it, figure it will heal. 3 days later, they have a fever. The wound is oozing. They are shaking with chills. You need antibiotics. Normally, easy. Drive urgent care, wait 2 hours, get prescription, pick it up at Walgreens. But now imagine the same scenario during a crisis. Roads are impassable. Hospitals are overwhelmed or closed. Pharmacies are ransacked or only filling critical prescriptions. You call the urgent care number. Busy signal. You drive there anyway. Locked. A sign says they're operating at limited capacity for life-threatening emergencies only. Your spouse's infected hand does not qualify. Not yet. Not until the infection reaches their bloodstream and they go into septic shock. By then, it is too late. Or maybe you get lucky. Maybe you get into the ER. Maybe after 14 hours of waiting, someone finally looks at the wound and writes a prescription. You drive to 3 pharmacies, all out of stock. The 4th has it, but their system is down, and they cannot process insurance, and the cash price is $300, and you only have $80 in your wallet because ATMs have been offline for a week. Do you see how fast this spirals? Do you see how many single points of failure exist between you and a medication that costs $5 when you plan ahead? Now, let me show you what preparedness actually looks like. You have a small waterproof container in your emergency kit. Inside are individually vacuum-sealed courses of 4 different antibiotics. Amoxicillin for general bacterial infections and respiratory issues. Ciprofloxacin for urinary tract infections and gastrointestinal bacteria. Azithromycin for pneumonia and certain skin infections. Doxycycline for tick-borne diseases, and a backup broad-spectrum option. You also have a printed guide, not bookmarked on your phone, printed on paper, that lists common infections, their symptoms, and which antibiotic to use with proper dosages. Your spouse cuts their hand. You immediately clean it with iodine, not just soap and water. You apply antibiotic ointment, not just a Band-Aid. You monitor it twice daily. On day 2, you notice early signs of infection, redness spreading, increased warmth. You do not wait. You start a 7-day course of amoxicillin immediately. By day 4, the infection is visibly improving. By day 7, it is healed. No ER visit. No desperate pharmacy search. No $300 crisis expense. No sepsis. No death. Just a $5 blister pack of fish antibiotics and the knowledge to use them correctly. But here is where most people mess this up. They hear this information and they go buy one bottle of fish amoxicillin and think they are covered. Wrong. Dead wrong. Dangerously wrong. One bottle gives you one course of treatment for one infection. What happens when your kid gets strep throat and your spouse has a UTI and you develop an abscess all in the same month? What happens when you use your antibiotics and then 6 months later someone else gets sick? You need redundancy. You need variety. You need a system. The people who survive are not the ones who bought one of everything. They're the ones who bought multiples of the critical items, who diversified their antibiotic types, who store them correctly so they remain effective for 5 to 10 years, who educated themselves on proper usage, so they do not create antibiotic-resistant infections by dosing incorrectly. And this is where we separate people who are actually prepared from people who just bought some stuff and feel better. The difference is knowledge. The difference is systems thinking. The difference is understanding that survival is not about gear. It is about information applied correctly under pressure. Let me hit you with something that is going to make you uncomfortable. There is a reason your doctor does not want you stockpiling antibiotics. And it is not the reason you think. Yes, antibiotic resistance is real. Yes, misuse creates superbugs. Yes, you can mess yourself up by taking the wrong drug or the wrong dose. But here is the truth behind the truth. The medical establishment does not trust you to make decisions about your own health, not because you are incapable, but because their entire system is built on information asymmetry. They have the knowledge, you have the need, and that gap is what justifies their authority and their income. The moment you educate yourself, the moment you take responsibility for basic medical decisions, you disrupt a trillion-dollar industry. You become less dependent, less compliant, less profitable, and that terrifies them more than antibiotic resistance ever will. Now, I am not saying doctors are evil. Most are good people trying to help. But the system they operate within has incentives that do not always align with your independence. They want you healthy, sure, but they also want you coming back. They want you needing them. And there is nothing that threatens institutional power more than individuals who educate themselves and take control. So, let me educate you right now. Antibiotics work by either killing bacteria outright or stopping them from reproducing. Amoxicillin is a penicillin-type drug that destroys bacterial cell walls. Ciprofloxacin is a fluoroquinolone that disrupts bacterial DNA replication. Azithromycin is a macrolide that blocks protein synthesis. Doxycycline is a tetracycline that prevents bacteria from making essential proteins. Each one targets different bacterial mechanisms, which is why you need variety. Some bacteria have thick cell walls that penicillin cannot penetrate, but fluoroquinolones slip through. Some bacteria are resistant to macrolides but vulnerable to tetracyclines. If you only have one type and the infection is resistant, you are helpless. But if you have 4 different classes of antibiotics, you have options. You have leverage. You have a fighting chance. This is not complicated medicine. This is basic microbiology that every first-year med student learns. The only reason it feels complicated is because the system benefits from your confusion. Here is the practical application. You need to know 3 things: what infection you are treating, what antibiotic matches that infection, and what dosage protocol to follow. For most common bacterial infections, the guidelines are straightforward. Amoxicillin, 500 milligrams 3 times daily for 7 to 10 days for respiratory infections, ear infections, and skin infections. Ciprofloxacin, 500 milligrams twice daily for 7 days for urinary tract infections and gastrointestinal infections. Azithromycin, 500 milligrams on day 1, then 250 milligrams daily for 4 more days for pneumonia and certain sexually transmitted infections. Doxycycline, 100 milligrams twice daily for 7 to 14 days for tick bites, acne-related infections, and as a malaria prophylactic. These are standard medical protocols, the same ones doctors prescribe every single day. The only difference is you are prescribing them for yourself based on symptom recognition instead of paying someone else $150 to tell you the exact same thing. And yes, there is risk in self-treatment. You can misdiagnose. You can take the wrong drug. You can develop side effects. But there is also massive risk in having no treatment option at all. In a crisis, The risk of inaction is almost always higher than the risk of educated action. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Legality. Is it legal to buy fish antibiotics for human use? Technically, these products are sold for aquarium use only, and labels explicitly state not for human consumption. If you purchase them with the stated intent of human use, you are potentially violating FDA regulations. However, purchasing them for their labeled purpose is completely legal. What you choose to do with a legally purchased product in a crisis scenario when no other options exist is a risk versus benefit calculation that only you can make. The FDA is not kicking down doors over fish antibiotics. They are not prosecuting individuals for personal stockpiles. Their concern is large-scale distribution and companies marketing these as human drugs. If society collapses and you use fish amoxicillin to save your kid's life, no regulatory agency is coming after you. And if society does not collapse, you have aquarium medication that you never needed to use. The downside risk is a $50 investment you did not use. The upside is potentially saving a life. That is not a hard calculation. Pause right here. We are halfway through, and most people have already clicked away. They heard something that challenged their assumptions, and their ego could not handle it. If you are still here, you are different. You are part of the 1% willing to hear uncomfortable truths. Comment, still here right now. Prove you are serious. Because what comes next is worth more than everything we have covered so far. Let me tell you what happens to the unprepared when infections hit during a crisis. I want you to visualize this because abstract statistics do not change behavior. Visceral imagery does. Imagine a suburban neighborhood. 6 weeks into a prolonged power outage. Water is rationed. Sanitation is failing. Garbage is piling up because trucks stop coming. Mosquitoes are breeding in standing water. Flies are everywhere. Your neighbor 2 houses down has been coughing for a week. It started as a cold. Now it is deep and wet and rattling. You can hear it through the walls at night. His wife is worried, but what can she do? Urgent cares are closed. The hospital is only taking trauma cases. She gives him over-the-counter cough syrup and prays it gets better. It does not get better. The cough turns into a fever. The fever turns into chills and confusion. His lips start turning blue because his lungs are filling with fluid. Pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia, completely treatable with a 5-day course of azithromycin. Except they do not have azithromycin. They have Tylenol and hope. 3 days later, he is dead, drowned in his own lungs, in his own bed, while his wife and kids watch helplessly. And this is not some far-fetched apocalypse scenario. This is what happened in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, in New Orleans after Katrina, in rural communities during the COVID surge when hospitals hit capacity and turn people away. When systems fail, simple infections become death sentences. Now imagine the same scenario, but you are prepared. Same neighborhood, same power outage, same sanitation collapse. You start coughing. You recognize the symptoms early. Productive cough would discolor mucus. Fever, chest tightness. You do not wait. You start azithromycin immediately. 500 milligrams day 1. 250 milligrams days 2 through 5. By day 3, you're already improving. By day 6, you are functional again. No hospital, no drama, no funeral. Just knowledge in a $12 blister pack of fish antibiotics that you bought a year ago and stored in a cool, dark place. That is the difference. That is what preparedness actually looks like. Not tactical gear and guns. Not freeze-dried food and water filters. Those matter, sure. But antibiotics are the gap between discomfort and death. They are the single highest impact, lowest cost investment you can make in your family's survival. And yet 99% of preppers ignore them completely because they are not sexy, because they do not make you feel like a badass, because you cannot post pictures of your fish antibiotics on Instagram and get likes from your tactical bros. Here's another angle most people miss. Antibiotics are not just for you. They are currency. They are leverage. In a prolonged crisis, the person who controls medicine controls power. You think your neighbor with 1,000 rounds of ammo is going to threaten you when his daughter has a raging kidney infection, and you're the only person within 20 miles who has ciprofloxacin? You think he is taking that medication by force, or is he trading you everything he has to save her life? Antibiotics become more valuable than gold when the system collapses because they solve immediate, life-threatening problems that no amount of food or fuel or firepower can address. I am not saying stockpile them to exploit people. I am saying stockpile them because helping your community in a crisis is how you build alliances that keep you alive long-term. The guy who shares medicine when someone is dying earns loyalty that lasts decades. The guy who hoards and refuses to help gets remembered too, just in a very different way. Let me give you the shopping list. This is what you buy this week. Not next month. Not when you have extra money. This week, because availability is already declining and prices are already climbing. Go to Amazon, eBay, or any aquarium supply site. Search for Fishmox Forte, which is amoxicillin 500 milligrams. Buy at least 3 bottles, 30 capsules each. That gives you 3 full treatment courses or 1 extended course plus backups. Next, search for Fishflox Forte, which is ciprofloxacin 500 milligrams. Buy 2 bottles. Then Fish Zithro, which is azithromycin 250 milligrams. Buy 2 packs. Finally, search for Fish Doxy, which is doxycycline 100 milligrams. Buy 2 bottles. Total cost? Somewhere between $150 and $200, depending on current prices. That is less than 1 case of decent ammunition. Less than a budget optic for your rifle. Less than a single emergency room visit with no insurance. And it covers your household for multiple infection scenarios over multiple years if stored correctly. You store them in a waterproof container, in a cool, dark location, away from humidity. A closet works. A safe works. Not a garage where temperatures fluctuate. Not a bathroom where moisture is constant. Treat them like precious cargo because in a crisis, they are. Now let us address the objections because I know exactly what you are thinking. First objection, what if I take the wrong antibiotic and make things worse? Valid concern. Here is the reality. Most common bacterial infections respond to broad-spectrum antibiotics like amoxicillin. If you are treating something and it is not improving after 3 days, you stop and reassess. You switch to a different class. The danger is not trying one antibiotic and it being ineffective. The danger is taking antibiotics incorrectly, stopping mid-course because you feel better, or using them for viral infections where they do nothing. The solution is education. You download and print antibiotic guides. You learn to differentiate bacterial from viral infections. You commit to finishing full courses, even when symptoms improve. This is not rocket science. People in third world countries manage their own antibiotic use every single day without medical degrees. You are not less capable than a farmer in rural Kenya. You just have less practice because you have been outsourcing the thinking. Second objection, what about antibiotic resistance? Also valid. Antibiotic resistance develops when bacteria are exposed to antibiotics frequently enough to evolve defenses, but not killed completely. This happens in 2 scenarios. Overuse, taking antibiotics for every minor issue including viral infections where they're useless, and underuse, not completing full courses, so some bacteria survive and adapt. The solution is simple. Only use antibiotics for confirmed or highly suspected bacterial infections. Always complete the full prescribed course even if you feel better. Never use them preventatively unless you are in a specific high-risk scenario like post-surgery or after certain exposures. If you follow these rules, your personal antibiotic use has virtually 0 impact on global resistance patterns. The real drivers of antibiotic resistance are factory farming where animals are fed constant low-dose antibiotics and overprescription by doctors who write scripts for viral infections just to get patients out of their office. Your responsible emergency stockpile is not the problem. Third objection, how do I know these fish antibiotics are actually the same quality as human prescriptions? Fair question. Here is what you do. Check the manufacturer. Reputable brands like Thomas Labs, Fishbiotic, and Midland Vet Service produce fish antibiotics in facilities that also manufacture human pharmaceuticals. Check the label for active ingredient and dosage. It should list the exact compound, like amoxicillin trihydrate, and the exact milligram amount. If it matches human prescriptions, it is the same molecule. Check reviews, not from aquarium hobbyists, but from the thousands of people who leave coded reviews about using them off-label. You will see patterns. You will see people confirming effectiveness. Are there sketchy suppliers selling bunk products? Sure. Same as human pharmaceuticals. That is why you buy from established suppliers with verified reviews and transparent ingredient lists. Do your homework. This is not a blind trust situation. This is a verify then trust situation. Let me bring this home. You are living in the most fragile moment in modern history. Supply chains are strained. Geopolitical tensions are escalating. Climate events are increasing in frequency and severity. Pandemics are not once-in-a-century anomalies anymore. They are recurring possibilities. And every single one of these threats has the same downstream effect: disrupted access to medical care. You can pretend everything will always be fine. You can trust that the system will hold. You can hope that when your family needs help, it will be there. Or you can spend $200 in 30 minutes right now to eliminate one of the biggest threats to your survival. Not the sexy threat. Not the one that gets clicks on prepper forums. The boring, unglamorous, statistically overwhelming threat of bacterial infections in crisis. The choice is yours. But here's what I know. The people who survive collapse scenarios are not the toughest or the strongest or the best armed. They are the ones who prepare for the most likely threats instead of the most exciting ones. They are the ones who bought antibiotics instead of another case of ammo. They are the ones who educated themselves instead of assuming someone else would save them. Real talk. How many of you have spent more on gun accessories this year than on medical supplies? Drop a hand emoji if that is you. You are not alone. We have all been there. The prepper industry has trained us to focus on the wrong things because fear of violence sells better than fear of infection. But now you know better. And knowing better means you have a responsibility to do better. Hit subscribe if this changed your perspective. Share this with one person who needs to hear it. Not for me, for them. Because the information in this video could literally save their life or the life of someone they love. And if you made it this far, if you are still here after 4,000 words of uncomfortable truth, comment the word prepared one more time. Not because you were prepared before, but because you are committed to being prepared now. Stay smart. Stay informed. Or stay a statistic. Your choice. One more thing. See that progress bar? Not quite done. 99% leave before this final part. The 1% who stay get the bonus most people miss. The single most important antibiotic nobody talks about. The one that treats the infection that kills more people in grid-down scenarios than any other. Drop Inner Circle in the comments if you found this. Welcome to the 1%.